Howdy y'all, welcome back to the farm. Today we're working on a really cool project for the Toyota 4runner. And that is, we're going to be putting together this new off-road bumper, all steel plate bumper from Coastal Offroads. Now, Coastal Offroads is a company I've been following for a while. I've been really excited about getting this product for my 4runner. Ever since I put the bigger tires on, there's still a little bit of clearance issues that I keep having to cut away. This is going to fix a lot of those for the front. It's also going to take that bumper and raise it up a lot. There's a lot of clearance that the bumper doesn't leave, and this is going to pull that back and lift it up so that I've got a way better approach angle on the front. Plus, it's going to look sick. This is my first welding project ever. I mean, I've done a couple of tacks, a couple of small welds, put little plates on the body mounts when I had to chop them off for these big 33s, but this is going to be the first time I've ever put anything substantial together. The good news is this kit comes all pre-cut, except for a couple cuts you have to make on the tubes just to make it fit your preference. Everything else is already laser cut, perfectly precise, so all you got to do is lay it out, put it together like big kid Legos. Let's look at the welder I've got for this project before we start laying this out and getting everything ready. Now, like I said, this is my first time ever welding anything, and the welds I have done, I've been doing with this, the titanium MIG 140. This machine comes from Harbor Freight, but I got it used, along with the tank full of gas that I got from a local welder, and this cart. Altogether, I'm not in this for very much because I just wanted to get started. I always thought welding was akin to magic. You could put two pieces of wood together easy enough with glue or a nail or a screw, but putting two pieces of metal together I always thought was pretty exceptional. So getting this welder here in the shop has allowed me to put a couple of things together and fix a few things. But like I said, it's my first big fabrication job, so we're going to be putting this thing to the test. Now, according to the specs, this will weld up to 1/4 inch in a single pass. So we're going to see how it does with the slightly thinner 3/16 inch steel. There's going to be a lot of people out there who are going to say, that's not big enough, you really need to go with a bigger welder. I'm here to say, let's give it a shot, see how we do, and if we got to do it in a couple of passes and weld both sides, that's just what we have to do because that's what we're here. We're just here to learn and see if we can figure this out. So this is the machine we've got, and I tell you what, this welder's better than no welder, so let's see how it does. So the first thing we got to do in this project is take this old plastic bumper off. This is held in by clips on top, and there's about 6 bolts here in the bottom. Those bolts are 10mm bolts, so we're going to start on this side, remove all the bolts from the bottom, and then start to try to peel this away and get those, yeah, they're just plastic clips holding the top in. So we'll start taking these out. Now that we got the bumper is loose, I'm going to take these bulbs out, 1/4 turn, loosen them up, and then they'll shake right out of that casing. Bulb 1, bulb 2, those never worked for me. This one's cracked. Well, that's why they never worked. Alright, cool. And that's the whole bumper. We'll put that off to the side, because we don't need that where we're going. Oop. The next thing to do is going to be removing this factory crash bar right here. It does have this plastic, what would you call this? Like diverter to keep the keep dust from being sucked up into the radiator here. So we gotta loosen that first. But there's 4 nuts on each side, 1 in the middle of each side, and 3 on the outside of each side that we're gonna have to back out. I think they're 14s. So we'll get those out first, and then the whole crash bar will come down. So these 14s will be a little tight, but they're not going to be torqued on too much. Yeah, so I'm just going to loosen them up with my breaker bar, and then I'll come back in with my electric socket driver to get the rest of the way out. You're actually going to save all of these nuts because you're going to use them to reattach the new bumper later. I'm going to leave that last one on a little bit so it doesn't fall off when I do this side. Okay. All right. It's all the factory nuts off. These are the kind you just pry out. These little plastic connectors are the kind you pry out the middle. Maybe pry out the middle. It should wiggle right out. And we're not going to use this. The bumper, the new bumper comes with a metal piece that takes up this entire area, but we will maintain those as part of what we put back in storage if somebody else ends up wanting them or we end up going back for some reason. I mean, like, you might break some of these, but these are pretty easy to find replacements of. There's a Dorman part for all these plastic clips, so if you end up breaking some, it's not the end of the world, and we're not going to reuse these anyways, on this build that is. But so far, we've done it without breaking one. You can't say that before you do the last one. If you say you did it without breaking one before you do the last one, it's a friggin' unicorn. Alright, let's put that in storage. These lights never really worked for me, but I'm not going to cut them off. I'm going to zip tie them back into the fender on both sides and preserve them in case we want them poking out of the in case we want them poking out of the bumper later, because there are a bunch of light options for this bumper, and if we want to reuse some of these factory connections, we totally can. They actually sell a kit on Coastal Offroad. Part number, I don't know what the part number is, but it's on their website. You can buy it along with this bumper, so that you've got the factory blinkers and factory fog lamps all up front in the same places using the same connections. But like I said, for our build for now, we're just going to put this up in place. The other really cool thing about this bumper is it's not a weld in place bumper, it's bolted in using the factory bolts. So if we want to, we can always take it off and get back under here to do things like wiring, clean up, whatever, if we change our mind about these lights in the future. But for now, they're all packed in there. You can see here's another light option that Toyota came from the factory with. So there's actually 3 different options down here for lights. All right, let's go do the same thing to the other side. All right, the last thing we gotta remove is this little plastic block right here. It's held in by these 2 silver screws. These 2 black bolts down here actually just hold in the headlight, so you don't need to touch them. And then it's just a plastic clip in the back to pry off. Just get your hands back there and get that clip started. or just snap it off. There we go. Yeah, it just needs a little persuasion, I guess. That little thing just holds on the... Cool. Alright, Nito Torpedo. And that's the last thing we need to take off the truck. Now we gotta go put some stuff together. So now that we got everything taken off of the truck that needs to come off, the next thing we gotta do is start assembling this. Now, this may look like a lot, but the cool thing is there are a lot of instructions here to go through, and they pretty much show you a picture every step of the way. High quality CAD drawings. I mean, they try to set you up as best they can. And the first thing they tell you to do is to get all your pieces out and lay them out like this, so you've got everything orienteered right, you know you have all the parts, and you can start by labeling every piece. Every piece that's cut out here has a corresponding number, and most of them match. So all these pieces here have a matching piece on this side, and then the middle pieces are singular. So what we're going to do next is go through and write the number for the piece on each piece. Now this may seem like a lot of setup, and some of it may seem obvious to you, but I don't know. I don't have a lot of experience in this, but when I've done projects like this in the past, the setup work is what sets you up for success along the way. So I'm gonna go through, label all these pieces before we start bolting things on. These instructions are pretty cool though. I'd give them $10 more if they were in color. So the first thing we're welding together is actually gonna be these 3 triangles here. They stack up to make a piece that looks like this, and then the other one just mirrors it, so that you've got one for the passenger side and one for the driver's side. This is a great opportunity to dial in your welder because all of these welds are going to be behind other pieces. So when welding together these 3 pieces, the back plate, the top plate, all of that's a great time to dial in your welder settings to try to get better and better welds for when you have to weld the outside. I did have to spend a little bit of time grinding this down because this surface right here lines up with the surface right here, and I didn't want there to be any interference with this giant plate and the outside. So the next thing I'm going to do is bolt these on with this plate, get everything set up, and start welding, start tacking these shelf pieces, these interior support pieces to this plate and this plate. Now that we got this bolted to the car, we got the battery disconnected, and I've got plate number 4 acting as a spacer between these. I've checked all my measurements and we're very plumb. This is looking good. We're square to this plate. The way I did it was I have a leveled it this way diagonally using plate 4 to span this gap right here. And then for these I just measured diagonals, and then I measured across diagonals on the top plane, on the side plane, and then on a diagonal plane here, so we could make sure that this was gonna fit. I also took plate 6, which is the big plate we're going to put on here in a bit. Took plate 6 and it wraps around the front just to check that both sides of plate 6 touch the outside so we can weld it on later, and then also that the fitment looked good on the bottom without any kind of contact with this front side here. I'm just going to put a couple of tacks in these in plate 2 right here. So plate 2 and plate 3 are attached together before we put on plate 4. And after we put on plate 4, we're going to tear the whole thing off and do all the finish welds up here on the bench. Alright, let's get to it. Cool. So now that we've got plates 2 and 3 tacked together, we got plate 4 in place. Now plate 4 spans the distance between the plates 2 on this side and on this side, and it also gets welded to plate 3. So what we want to do at this point is make sure that we've got our coolant line cut out, lined up with the coolant line cut out on plate 3, and that we are touching plates 3 and 2, and also we're going to test fit plate 6 on here, which is the one that wraps around the front, to make sure that plate 4 doesn't have any interference with plate 6 and plate 2, because we want plate 6 to have plenty of connection all the way around. We're going to throw that on real quick, check for fitment, and then one thing to note at this point is if you're putting on a winch today, which I'm not, but if you're putting on a winch today, you're going to want to remove this this bumper support here, probably this one here, and then you're going to need a way to move this AC line back towards the radiator, because obviously you're going to have some clearance issues with these back winch mount holes and this AC line. It's really cool to have this cutout, so if you're not installing a winch, you can do this without moving your AC line, but for installation of the winch, you're going to want to push that back. Alright, there's our plate 6, and we've got a good clean line all the way around. We just want to make sure that plate 4 doesn't interfere with plate 6, but that we've still got contact so that we can weld plate 4 and 6 together later. We also won't weld plate 6 on at this point, because once we weld plate 6 on, we won't be able to weld on the insides of plates 3, 2, and 4. So we'll take this off once we confirm the fitment all around the edges. We'll take plate 6 off, we'll finish weld plates 4, 3, and 2 after we tack 4 in place, but we'll do that on the bench. We'll take this off the vehicle so we can get all around it. All right, let's take this off and get to welding. Now this thing is starting to get heavy, so as you're adding more pieces of metal to it, just remember, it all starts to add up. So let's see. It's not so bad yet though. Once you get plate 6 on, it's gonna be a beast. All right, so now I've got the bumper back off the truck. You can see I did my best trying to weld upside down, but did not do a very good job. But because the bumper's now off the truck, I can get to finishing welding 3 and 4 together, as well as 2 to 4 and 3. So we'll get this whole inside area finish weld, and then we'll put some weld through these plugs on the back side to weld to further weld plates 3 and 2 together. But yeah, so far this is looking pretty good. Another thing that's really cool about this project, it's been some great practice on the welder. This is my first ever welding project. It shows, I mean, but it's cool because you got to get started somewhere. So this is a lot of opportunity to weld inside before I'm welding outside where you're going to see it. So it gives me a lot more time to try to get these welds dialed in before I start welding on the outside, where it's going to be much more visible, and I'm going to have to spend a lot more time cleaning it up if it doesn't look very good. Alright, I'm going to get to welding this, and then I'll catch back up with you when it's time to put on plate 6. Just like that, we've got all this interior side welded together. We've welded each of the joints from the mounting surfaces to this plate 4 here, and then we've welded both sides of all the mounting surfaces from plate 3 to plate 2, so that we've got a good connection to the vehicle, and because this is going to be the backbone for everything else that gets attached to this. So at this stage, I'm going to do an extra step that's not in the instructions, and that is I'm going to spray paint the inside here with kind of like a black primer color, just because I don't want any rust to be an issue inside. So I'm going to let this cool down for a bit, spray the inside here where it's going to be difficult to get to later, before I go back, put this back on the truck and start attaching plates 6 and then the rest of the plates. Alright, I'll let this cool down, I'll spray paint it, and I'll catch back up with you when this is on the truck. Here in the background you can see we've got the mounting assembly, the backbone of our bumper, attached back to the vehicle, because from this point forward we're going to be welding components directly onto the vehicle so we can match these body lines. The only other thing we need to do on the bench real quick is, before we mount plate 6, we need to mount these, we need to weld these mounting tabs to the inside of where these pod lights go. These holes are about 3 inches across, so I've made a mark at 1.5 inches, and these tabs are 2 inches across, so I made a mark at 1 inch, so I can line those up. And then per the instructions, I've made a line at 5/8 of an inch from the bottom of the hole, and that's where I'm going to attach this. I don't have lights to mount today, but if I want to mount lights in the future, I want to make sure that this is easy to reference when mounting those lights. So I'm gonna tack these in place, then weld them in, and then we'll go put this on the mounting assembly over here so that we can weld 6 to whatever we have on the car. Okay. So we got those tabs welded in, and now we're just gonna drop this thing into place. So now that we got those tabs and this is fitting all right, we're gonna start tacking plate 6 here to plate 2 on the outside. Now as you can see, we're a little shy here on top. Because of the welds down here, this plate has bent in, so we're just gonna try to correct that by tacking flush on top, and as we work our way to the bottom, pushing this out so that we can, pushing this out from this side so that we can kind of get those top plates to flex back out, because we've got a good clearance here at the bottom, but here at the top it's obviously flexed on us a little bit. Everything else is looking real good, so we'll get this tacked on, And what will come after that will be a series of tacking on these smaller pieces and kind of following those around the outside. We'll tack everything in place before pulling it all off and probably finish welding over here on the bench so that we're not having to worry about getting in all these angles, especially, you know, when we go to weld behind and go to weld underneath. We'll just tack everything in place so we can finish weld and grind everything smooth, and then it'll be done. So we'll get started with these tacks here and then start adding the pieces that go out on one side, and then the other side is going to be identical. So with plate 6 tacked on to the rest of the bumper assembly, it's time to start putting together the wings. Now the wings are mirror images of each other. So what we're going to do is put together one wing at a time, adding all the pieces, and then move to the other side. The first step we're going to do is put together these other brackets that make up the front of the wing. I'm doing them very similar to how we did the front, where we're marking out the middle. We're marking out the middle of the hole that the pod goes through, and the piece, so that we can line these up. Once again, we're drawing a line 5/8 of an inch below the bottom of the hole so we can weld them in for when those lights fit in. So we'll go ahead and get those tacked up now. There's a burr there. Line it up with our 2 marks. And this, one thing to note is that this is not a straight line. This is not a 90-degree angle, and neither is this. So this line actually is inclined from this point to this point, so it's not going to look level on the bottom. You're going to want to go off your reference mark on top to see that it's level. There's 1, 2. We'll do 1 on the back side. Cool. So that one's tacked in. We'll tack this one in the same way. So line this up with our 2 marks. Use our magnet to hold it in place. And then same thing. We're going to tack it twice on the back and once on the front. Great. Alright, cool. So everything's tacked up. Let's go back to the car and we'll start adding the wings. Alright, so like I was saying earlier, the rest of this wing is just these pieces here. And for the time being, all we need to do is tack them in place from the center assembly and then assemble it just like it's laid out here. With this being the main wing that comes around, everything else just has to touch all other vertices around it. So this piece right here just goes off of here, and then off of here, this one, here and here, on and on. We just got to get all of this together, and it's just tacking it all together at this point so that we can put it together, take it off, we'll finish it up on the bench. That way we're not having to do a bunch of welds all over the place. So far our penetration's been pretty good with our little welder, so we're just going to get these tacks in, and then we'll take it over there and figure out if we need to weld it on both sides or not. But we're going to do that after we get everything tacked in place. So the first thing is going to be to take this big wing here, this piece, and attach it here so that it comes all the way around the vehicle. Now, the most important thing is to keep a consistent line with the body, all the way around. This wheel well is not straight, it bends up. So we want to make sure that we're following this body line up to the wheel well. So we'll get this one in place first. We'll kind of set the angle with those tacks in place, and then we'll start tacking everything else to it. Alright, cool. And then we'll set that angle with the pieces that come out from there, starting with this piece number 8 right here. Alright, that is one side tacked together. All the pieces are there. We just need to do the finish welding. We just need to do the finish welding and probably grind some stuff off, because there's a couple of places where if you're not careful, you'll have a little bit of run over, like right here on the very tip. There's a little bit extra, and I just have to fold some of that in. There's some bending down there that isn't quite in the right place, but when we get on the bench, we'll be able to close up some of those gaps, because everything's about where we want it as far as the body goes. Alright, so now it's time to do the other side. So it's the next day, last night, where we left off. We had everything tacked together and we were getting ready to start the bars. Now, I got these bars fitted up, but right now we're having a little bit of an issue. There's clearance between the bottom of this hood right here and the top of this bar as it opens and shuts. Now, we've got clearance on the front, but as you can see, if we move these bars in to intersect with this bar at this height, it actually stops the hood from closing. So I think what the solution is we're going to, this is moved all the way to the front, so I think what we're going to do is take maybe 5 degrees off of this side to this side and tilt this front bar forward, and then cut a couple of inches off of the bottom of this bar, so that instead of intersecting at a downward angle like this bar is more level and intersects closer to the bottom of this curve right here on either side. Unfortunately, this is the way it comes with the kit. You've got this bar is straight cut, and then these two bars are left long, so you can cope them and shape them on either end to fit. But it gives us some opportunity to experiment a little bit and see what we can come up with. So let's start by trying to cut these sides down a little bit and get these bars lower so they don't interfere with the hood, and then we'll see how much more, before we cut these ends off and start coping this, we'll see how much more we have to lean this bar forward once we get these bars cut down. Quick update on the tubing. We've got the first tube in place. We've cut out the cope right there, and if you look at it from the front, it very closely follows that body line on top of the light. Now what we had to do was cut 2 1/4 inches off of this side and quite a bit off of this side. I think we cut something like 1.5 inches to start over here, and then we had to cut the cove to meet that center bar. We also took the center bar and just angled it just ever so slightly, probably about 5 degrees out, and then we just tack welded the bottom. We might break that and grind it down, but honestly, probably not. We're probably going to fill that in and then see if we can't just get good welds on this supporting bar right here to help support this this tilt. But we'll see. We're going to use this first bar as a template, and then we'll go make the same cuts on the other one. As you can see here, we've got both bars on. I will say, because like everything else goes together so cleanly, because it's all precision cut out, fits together perfectly. The bars are not. they just don't fit out of the box. You have to cope them, you have to cut them shorter, you have to play with the angle. Even still, we've got like, I don't know, maybe like a 16th, a 32nd, the tiniest bit of interference on the right hand side that I can deal with, because with this plastic piece right here. And as you can see, you can hardly tell it's there. It's still a pain, because this is certainly the hardest thing to do. Is just getting all of these cuts and copes right with all these pipes. Because this is a complex angle. You've got, you know, 2 non-90 degree angles intersecting, not even in the same plane. So I would say that if there was anything to be said about this, would be more instructions on how how they recommend to set this up so that it does fit and clear the hood. Because this doesn't, and it definitely made this part of the job a lot longer. You know, yesterday I probably assembled both wings in maybe 2 or 3 hours. These 3 pipes alone have taken me about 2.5 hours to get to this point. So now what we're going to do is pull this back off the car, put it on this table over here, and start doing all the finishing welds to weld off this, and by that time we're going to be very close to done. So I'm going to get that started, and we'll see you somewhere along the way. Alright, so things are coming along. We've got all of our finished welds in place. I started getting a little tired, so the welds started falling apart a little bit. We messed around with the settings. There's just a lot of cleanup that needs to happen, but there was cleanup I was going to have to do anyway. So I've been grinding on this thing, and I've also run out of flap discs. So I got to go to the store tomorrow morning, pick up some more flap discs, and finish this up tomorrow. I will say that one of the things that I didn't really prepare for was how much supplies I would need to finish this. So I have used about 4 pounds of welding wire. Some of that's going to be inexperience. I did use a lot of wire to fill in some gaps and to learn welding, especially on the bottom side. But I did use about two spools of wire, and we've used probably about 5 or 6 flap discs so far. So I'm probably going to pick up 5 or 6 more tomorrow, so I got plenty to finish this job out. Anyway, I'm going to go pick those up in the morning though, and then tomorrow afternoon we're going to finish this thing up because we are very close. Alright, so first thing I did this morning is I went out and got some more grinding discs and some flap discs. So what I've done is I have ground down all of the welds until they're a nice smooth transition. And then the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and paint it. I'm going to paint it with some automotive primer, so it's going to fill in some of these little perfections. I'll be able to sand it a little bit if I want to, but really I just got to get a coat of paint on this because I got to start driving this truck again. So a coat of paint on this is going to make it look great. It's going to hide a bunch of these little spots that you can see, and it's going to protect it from any rust until I eventually do some type of like hard truck bed liner or something that I spray on to give it a lot more protection. I've already painted it all. I think it looks great, and then I put the 4 nuts on each side, the 45 millimeter bolt, the M12 bolt on the bottom, and we are literally just at clearance, so we're good. I think this bumper looks awesome. Honestly, like I've said along the way, the only things I would really watch out for, and maybe some recommendations I'd make to Coastal Off-Road, is better instructions on what to do with these tubes, as far as like what's the best way to angle them to fit the hood of your vehicle. But otherwise, the instructions were awesome. This was a super easy build. I just talked to one of my buddies this morning. He's got a 4runner, and he was like, isn't it tedious to put all the little pieces together? And I would say no, not based on the way Coastal Off-Road set this up. It is very easy to tack all your pieces in. The longest part was really just the long welds to weld everything and finish weld once you tacked it together. But even that was great experience. It's a great learning opportunity if you haven't welded before, like I haven't. So once you've got it on, you got plenty of place for a winch. You wouldn't even have to take this off to put a winch in, I imagine. So I'm very excited about how this turned out. Anyway, thanks a bunch for coming. What?
No, I was just admiring. It looks mean.
Yeah, it looks really mean.
I don't want to distract you.
So thanks again for coming on this fix with me. This was a lot of fun. If you're interested in more details about this, look in the description below. I'm going to include a link to Coastal Off-Road. They've got bumpers for a lot of different types of vehicles, and they're all put together very well. If you have any comments about this, leave them below. And if you like this video, give me a thumbs up. Also, consider subscribing, because I've got a lot of 4runner content coming out. And I really hope to be able to take a video of taking this thing out on the trail soon. I love you. I'm almost done. Anyway. See y'all later. Talk to y'all. What do I always say at the end of my thing? Thanks again, and see y'all next time. Bye now.